open your Bibles to John chapter 5. We're beginning a new series today, and as I think about the beginning of this series, I want to give a pastoral warning, so to speak, over the next few weeks as we look at John chapter 5, John chapter 6, John chapter 8, and John chapter 9. And as we look at the down and out stories, these amazing stories in which Jesus interacts with somebody in the margins. When we think about these things, I wanted to warn everybody because today's sermon may challenge you. In fact, it should to some degree. This series may challenge you overall. This may be one of those series where you're kind of squirming each week like, oh, this is kind of getting under my skin. And ultimately, I just kind of want you to know about City Coast as a church, that if you are a part of this church, if you're here for today, if you're here for this series, if you're around City Coast Church, these things will change you. They will form you in a way that is counter to the formation we receive from the world. We are a counter-formation culture, so to speak. The things that we teach and the things that we learn from the life of Jesus form us to look more and more like Jesus, not more and more like everybody else in Fairfield County. And so, pastoral warning shots fired. You got it, all right? They're out there. But I also want to begin with a bit of a confession, a pastoral confession, because I think that there's this vortex, or as a friend described it this week, there's a gravitational pull in our culture to move up and in, up and in. Everything is up and in. There's always somebody above me and a circle that's built around them, and I am obsessed with getting into that circle. I want to move up and in. I want to be where the action is. I want to be where the people are. And this vortex of up and in has gripped my heart in many ways. And so preparing this series, preparing this sermon, and trying to establish this church has been really formative for me. This is something that I look at and I go, man, I need this. I idolize celebrities. And I worship at their temples. Like, what do I mean by that? I mean, like, the other day, I'm like, oh my gosh, did you guys hear Aaron Judge got kicked out of a baseball game? Did you hear, like, he got kicked out first time in his career that he got ejected from a game? And I'm like, why do I know or care about Aaron Judge? Why do I put on a jersey with number 99 to reflect back to Aaron Judge his own glory? Why do I walk into Yankee Stadium, the temple that it is, and spend exorbitant amounts of money to experience closeness to Aaron Judge? In fact, if he looks in the direction of where I'm sitting, or if he by all graces throws the ball in our direction, you'll see people try to catch that ball because that ball touched Aaron Judge. I idolize celebrities and I worship at their temples. I'm a Swiftie. I don't mind saying it. Don't mind saying it. But we write 13 on our hand. 13 on our hands, red lipstick. We go to these massive arenas to join with the other worshipers. I don't think it's just athletes and entertainment. I think it happens with regard to the wealthy. I think, when you think about just New York City in general, we have Broadway and Wall Street. And when I look around and I see all those zip-up vests with somebody's name on it, usually 3 men, like we identify by that, right? We try to get to the C level of these companies and organizations. We try to break through or to create something that's never been created before. We do it with influencers too, people online, like all of the mentions and tags and things that we do. We're trying to create or a connection within that digital space. I think whether it's stadiums or whether it's streets or whether it's the digital space, we're always kind of idolizing these celebrities and worshiping at their temples. We wear their jerseys, we wear their vests, we wear their lipstick. We mention them and tag them for some sort of attempt to get up and in. We want to be up and in. And here's Jesus with all these reminders through John's gospel that we're called down and out. It's a reminder of how the kingdom works. And it's a reminder that will help us escape the vortex of the empire. We're trying to build a church that combats this vortex together. And sometimes when you talk about this stuff, it has some element of kind of pastoral prophecy. It can feel like it's cutting against the edge. And I want you to know that that's happening in me each and every week. that the compassionate counter movement of the kingdom confronts powerful empires both in the world and in our hearts. I had it happen to me this week. We were at an event and there was this special speaker, a guest speaker, the celebrity speaker who all of us saw on the pamphlet or on the advertisements to get to this particular event. And in the midst of this, I find myself sucked into that up and in vortex. I'm like, man, I want to be close to them. I want to get a picture with them. I want to be able to tag that picture later so people see that I was with them. And in the midst of this event, it was for the Bridgeport Rescue Mission, and there were these stories of addicts who are in recovery and who are being restored through the work and ministry of the Bridgeport Rescue Mission. I thought, why is it that I want so desperately to get a picture with the guest speaker, but not with a person whose story was highlighted? Why, when both of these people stand up in the room, do I find myself drawn to the celebrity and not to the person who literally lives in my community? Why am I so drawn up and in instead of down and out? And of those two, which of those two would Jesus move toward? And so we come to John chapter 5. I'm sorry, I don't have my clicker today. I forgot it back there. Can you bring it up, Leon? Sorry. Thank you. I just realized that as I went to click to John chapter 5. But I'm like, yeah, that's what happens when you take a week off, right? Gone for a week, you forget everything. But thank you, Tyler. Excellent. All right, so if you're wondering what the first point was, it was that compassionate counter movements confront powerful empires. And in John chapter 5, verse 1, it says this, that after Jesus had interacted with the Samaritan woman in Samaria, and after Jesus had healed an official in northern Galilee's son remotely, as he had done it from a distance, after these things, there was a feast of the Jews, and so Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool in Aramaic called Bethesda, which has 5 roofed colonnades. In these lay a multitude of invalids, people who had lost the ability to do something. They had become disabled, blind, lame, and paralyzed. Verse 5, one man was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, Jesus said to the man, "Do you want to be healed?" And the sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. And while I'm going, someone else steps down before me." And Jesus said to him, "Get up, take up your bed and walk." And at once the man was healed, and he took up his bed and walked. The kingdom follows Christ down and out. I want you to imagine losing the ability to do something that you probably take for granted on a day-to-day basis. And then I want you to project out 38 years worth of not being able to do that. And what that would feel like on a day-to-day basis. Now in Jerusalem, during a feast, when all these pilgrims are coming into the city, here is this man. He is not able to get to the temple to worship in the midst of the festival. In fact, he's hanging out by this pool called Bethesda, which there's this story and belief that when the waters of these pools bubble up, that the first person in will receive a supernatural healing. And so this man and a multitude of other disabled people are gathered around this pool. Their very disability hinders them from not only getting to the temple, even if they could get to the temple, they would not be allowed inside. So their only hope of being healed miraculously is through this pool, this place. Now I just want you to imagine, again, like whether it's the Met Gala or opening day at Yankee Stadium or some big Broadway presentation, Lin-Manuel Miranda himself is going to be at Hamilton tonight. Whatever it is, there's this company opening up, going public on Wall Street. There's something amazing happening in the city, and everybody is flocking into the city to go to this place. And you're walking into the city with Jesus. You're migrating in, and you're all excited because you think we're going to get backstage passes to whatever this important person is. And Jesus takes you through Central Park, and he walks you to the fountain, which we actually have called in New York City Bethesda Fountain. And there's a pool of water around this fountain, and there are these colonnades, these archways. And I want you to imagine Bethesda Fountain filled with a hospital ward of disabled people, disenfranchised and forgotten. They had just been put there. You thought you were going to the Met Gala, potentially seeing T Swift. And Jesus walks you to Bethesda. It means house of mercy. You thought you were going to the temple, which earlier in John's gospel had been called the house of commerce. But instead, Jesus is taking you down and out. In the midst of this, you find this man who has been here for 38 years. He's not some middle-class man having an existential crisis. His existence is crisis. It does not get more down and out than this guy. His whole existence is crisis. He is merely surviving day to day, moment to moment, for 38 whole years. He has no access to God because even if he could get to the temple, he cannot get inside of the temple. The path of up and in is completely closed to this man. He has no access to God until Jesus accesses him. Jesus goes to the house of mercy and asks him, do you want to be healed? Jesus' healing follows desire, not performance. This man literally could do nothing. He was not able to earn healing. And he tells his stories. Jesus, no one's here to carry me to the pool. No one is looking out for me. No one sees me. And when the water is stirred up, someone else gets in before me. Those who are down and out always have a no one or someone else story. No one is helping me, or someone else is getting what I need. As we follow Jesus into the city and as we go to the house of mercy, we find that mercy moves us to the margins. Jesus hasn't even gone to the temple yet. He went to Bethesda. And when I think about following Jesus, when I think about what does this mean for us, it's almost like in our world, we're in these like auditoriums and we're all staring at these stages. And you can put whatever you want on the stage, whoever is important to you, whatever celebrity you idolize, whatever circle you view as up and in. I don't care if it's educational, if it's economical, whatever it is, if it's entertainment, whatever it is, whatever circle you're looking at and going, if I can just get up and in, it's like our eyes are fixed on that stage and those people. And if we could just get close to them and just be like them, maybe then that hole in our soul would be filled. And then all of a sudden you hear this voice from the back of the auditorium, and it's like, have you ever been on a swivel chair and you reach down and you realize, oh, there's a latch here. And it's like, click, and you swivel. And all of a sudden, the stage is behind you. And you notice in the margins of the room, all these other people. You were so obsessed with moving forward, you never thought about who might be behind. Mercy, the heart of God, turns our attention from the stage to the corners. And that changes everything. We've been sold a false story, a false narrative, and this comes, I heard Andy Stanley talk about it first, North Point Church in Atlanta talks about this. Have you ever been told, well, if I can't do it for everybody, then I shouldn't do it for anybody? Like, have you ever said that I've said with our kids and cookies? Well, I don't have enough cookies for all of you, so I can't give a cookie to any of you. Right? We have this belief, right? If I can't do it for everybody, then I shouldn't do it for anybody. Or we do the same thing with our time, right? Well, if I can't do it all the time, then I should probably never do it. If I can't commit to it and be fully invested in it all the time, then I probably should never do it. And I just don't think that's not true. It's not true. Just because you can't do for everybody doesn't mean you shouldn't do for anybody. And just because you can't do it all the time doesn't mean you shouldn't do it at least one time. The way they talk about it, the mantra that they use around North Point is this idea of doing for one, or doing once. Do for one what you wish you could do for all. Or do once what you wish you could do all the time. Jesus says this really controversial thing in the midst of his anointing for burial. Later on in the gospel, you hear him say that you'll always have the poor with you. I just wonder sometimes, like, Jesus, why don't you just eliminate poverty? Poverty is not a wealth issue. Poverty is a justice issue. Jesus, why don't you just eliminate poverty? Why do you say that we'll always have the poor with us? Why do you say there will always be people in the margins? And Jesus says, Charlie, I will. I will eliminate it. I will bring justice. My kingdom, when it comes in its fullness, will be whole, perfect, and beautiful. There will not be injustice or poverty in the kingdom of God. But until that kingdom comes, there are power dynamics. And as long as people can have power, you will have poor people. As long as there is power in the hands of people, the poor will be with you. But what Jesus says that's so radical and so counter the empire mindset, so counter the empire of Caesar, so counter the empire of religion and the high priesthood, what Jesus says that is so counter to all of this, as he says that when you see the broken, when you see the disabled, when you see the marginalized, when you see the vulnerable, when you see the impoverished, when you see the incarcerated, when you see all of these people, you'll see me. Do you know who wasn't in the margins? Caesar. But most of us have fallen into the vortex of becoming more like Caesar than Christ. Every single event, every time you do for one, it is an act of confrontation to the empire. Every act of compassion is an act of confrontation. Why are we trying so hard to climb up and in instead of widening the circle down and out? Jesus knew exactly what he was doing in the midst of this conflict. In chapter 5, verse 9, it says, now the day was the Sabbath. Verse 10, so the Jews said to the man who had been healed, it's the Sabbath, it's not lawful for you to take up your bed. But he answered them, the man who healed me, that man said to me, take up your bed and walk. They asked him, who is the man who said to you, take up your bed and walk? Now, the man who had been healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn and there was a crowd in the place. But afterward, verse 14, Jesus found the man in the temple and said to him, see, you are well, sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you. The man went away and he told the Jews that it was Jesus who had healed him. And this is why the Jews were persecuting Jesus, because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, my Father is working until now, and I am working. This was why the Jews were seeking all the more to kill him, because not only was he breaking the Sabbath, he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. Now, we have to ask ourselves a question here. Did Jesus just not know what day of the week it was when he told this guy to take up his mat? Was he just confused, didn't have his planner out that day? He walked into Bethesda and he's like, take up your mat and walk. He was so moved with compassion and mercy for this man. He wanted to make him whole and restore him to health and rejuvenate his life. And he goes, afterwards he sees Jesus just like shakes it, no, it was Sabbath. They're going to get me. Jesus knew what day it was. Sabbath during a festival, the highest of high holy days. And Jesus is out doing work. This is an act of confrontation to heal this man. And I'll just give you 3 quick things that how compassion confronts the empire. It challenges the order of things. Challenges the order of things. Now Jesus looked and he healed this man, and then later on he's interacting with this man in the temple. The man didn't even know it was Jesus when they asked him, how did you get well? And he said, I don't know this guy. And then Jesus says this crucial thing. See, you are well. See, you are whole. Now go and sin no more. Jesus reverses the order here and says that your wholeness will lead to your holiness. You don't have to become holy in order to get whole. We have reversed this order big time in the empire. Performance-driven religion. What in this story comes first? The wholeness or the holiness? Jesus says, see, you are well. And once you are whole, you can pursue holiness. Jesus is confronting the system. He's challenging the system. Who is it that made the rule about the mat? Did you know you can look through the Old Testament and there's not one law about taking up your mat on the Sabbath? But there were all these extra laws that had been added by men, the traditions of men, the rules of men, the systems of men that had been layered on top of the idea of not working on the Sabbath. There was a specific law that Jesus was confronting here, and he's saying, who made that rule? Not my Father. In fact, my Father is working today. He's working this Sabbath. And so am I. He confronts the order. He confronts the system. And more than that, he is confronting the very structure itself. Is the power of God in the temple or in the Christ? You used to see all these videos of women swooning over young Elvis. Ah. You know, he was like Bieber before Bieber. Oh, you know, it's just craziness, right? And you hear these stories of what the venues would have to do as Elvis would leave. It's where the phrase came from, right? Someone would have to get on the PA. They'd have to announce over everybody, Elvis has left the building. So that people would start dispersing. In many ways, this miracle at Bethesda is Jesus' way of saying, the presence of God is leaving the building. It's not about the temple anymore. Christ's righteousness flows down and out, not up and in. This confrontation reverses the entire system. Everybody believed that moving into the temple got you closer to the presence of God. The closer and closer you got, the more and more limited and restricted it became. So much so that only the high priest, only one time of year, could get into the room where God was believed to dwell. One person, one time a year. And Jesus is saying, no, the presence of God has left the building. And every time you do for one, every single event in which you move down and out, you participate in bringing the kingdom of God, the presence of God, the righteousness of God, the goodness and beauty of God flows down and out, not up and in. At the top of up and in is Caesar. But in the margins, down and out, is Christ. It's a counter current to the world. And maybe that's what our souls need, is a bit of a detour and a detox. We are well versed in detours this week, are we not? I mean, sometimes in our world, a gas truck literally explodes on the highway. And one of the busiest travel corridors in the country is rerouted through all these different places, right? We were headed into Stanford the day of the accident. And I'll tell you, as I'm the guy that does every, save 2 minutes, save 1 minute, I do not know my way around the area yet. We're still getting new, we're still acclimated. I kind of only know the ways that everybody travels. I only know 95, I only know the Merritt, I only know Post Road, I only know the roads that everybody else is traveling. And all of a sudden, my GPS is winding me through these places, and I'm like, I've never been on this road. I've never seen these signs. I looked at this, I'm like, I don't know which direction we're facing. I don't know what town we're in. I just am like, we are on completely different roads. And I thought, sometimes that has to happen, or somebody has to recognize that the highways and byways by which we're all traveling are not working for us. And we've got to be detoured. We've got to be moved into these other spaces, these lesser known spaces. Maybe traveling the ancient roads of love and service are exactly what our souls need. We need to get off the up and in highways and start traveling the roads down and out. The world needs the ancient but not forgotten roads of love and service and generosity. The Bible would call them neighboring. Being reminded of who our neighbors are and the very real margins and vulnerable people groups that exist right here where we live. It's going to take driving some different roads to see those people. And it's going to take a massive shift in our heart to actually care that they're there. Because the vortex of up and in just keeps pulling and pulling and pulling us. So maybe this sermon is a gas tanker fire. It's going to force you, for the next few weeks, we're just going to force you onto other roads. And maybe once you're off the highway, you'll discover a new way to travel. I hope that traveling through this series over the next few weeks will help us see what Christ sees when he looks at Fairfield County. I hope it'll help us to feel what Christ feels when he looks upon his children who live here. And I hope it will motivate us to do the kinds of things that Jesus would do if he was walking through Fairfield County today. I think as we follow him down and out, we're going to find freedom from the empire in our hearts. And we're going to become an incredibly loving and service-oriented community of people. We're going to break from the vortex of up and in. It's what our souls need. And it's also what our neighbors need.